I'm Abigail. The clinking of glasses in the quiet wine bar felt like a distant echo of the chaos that had just subsided. Across from me sat my lawyer, Isabella, her eyes calm and steady. She raised her glass with a small smile. "To freedom hard-earned," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, the sound sharp and decisive. "To freedom," I echoed, letting the words settle deep in my chest. But as I sat there, sipping my wine, my mind was pulled back to that fateful dinner at my parents' house. The long mahogany table was set with crystal and silver, the china glistening under the chandelier. It was a setting my parents thrived in, formal and controlled. My mother, Vivian, a woman in her late 50s, with a penchant for elegance and manipulation, poured another glass of wine. My father, Ronald, a 60-year-old man with a commanding presence, slid a thick envelope across the table. "Abigail," he said smoothly. "This is about security for you, for all of us." I rested my hands in my lap, trying to steady my breath. The envelope lay between us like a challenge. My mother smiled as if she were offering me a treat. "It's just a formality, one family, one future." I pulled the papers free and scanned the first page. The words blurred for a moment, but the intent was clear. Every account, every investment, every property I had painstakingly built over the years was to be placed into a family trust managed solely by them. My father nudged a pen closer. "This way, we all move forward together. No more silos, no more risk." Inside, I felt a knot tighten. They weren't just asking, they were demanding everything I had worked so hard for. I looked up slowly and caught the faint triumph in their eyes, the expectation that I would cave in out of duty or guilt. Instead, I let my lips curve into a calm smile. "If this is truly about trust, then you won't mind what I've prepared." For the first time that evening, their expressions faltered. My mother's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, and my father's jaw flexed. Just then, the butler stepped into the dining room, his voice formal but laced with tension. "Ma'am," he said, "your lawyer is here." I leaned back in my chair, my heart steady. When Isabella's heels clicked against the floor behind me, I felt the weight of my parents' stares intensify. But before she could say a word, my mind drifted back to the years that had led me to this moment. In my early 20s, I was living in a rapidly changing city. Neighborhoods were being gentrified at an astonishing pace, and I saw it as an opportunity. While my friends were out partying on weekends, I was in run-down kitchens, stripping tiles, painting cabinets, and breathing life into homes that others would overlook. My hands were blistered, and my back ached, but I didn't give up. I reinvested every dollar I made, using the profit from one house flip to make the down payment on another. At 26, I signed the papers on my first duplex. Holding those keys felt like holding proof that hard work and discipline were more important than a privileged background. But when I showed my parents, their reaction was a dismissive laugh. "You were lucky the market turned," my mother said. "Without us, you'd never make it," my father added. Their words stung, but nothing hurt more than the memory of when I asked them to co-sign my student loan in college. They refused, claiming it would teach me responsibility. So, I worked double shifts, skipped meals, and lived in a cramped basement apartment with mold on the walls. Their refusal was a painful cut, but it also made me stronger. Over time, my duplex turned into 3 properties, then 5. I learned to negotiate, to anticipate market trends, and to stand my ground when contractors tried to take advantage of me. Every decision, every closing, every mortgage paid off was my own achievement. My parents never helped, yet they acted as if my success was a reflection of their own. Looking back, I realized that the contract on the dinner table wasn't a sudden idea. My parents had been testing the waters for years. My mother would casually say over coffee, "You should merge finances. Family must stick together. What's the point of keeping things separate if we're all working towards the same future?" My father, on the other hand, used guilt as his weapon. "After all we've done for you, don't we deserve to feel secure? Money should circulate within the family, not sit idle in your accounts." I used to brush their comments aside, thinking it was just their way of trying to stay relevant. But one afternoon, I came home early from a property showing and found my father in my apartment. The lease was in my name, and the locks were new, yet there he was, rummaging through the drawer where I kept my property deeds and bank statements. He looked up, startled, and then recovered with a stiff smile. "Just curious," he said, as if curiosity gave him the right to invade my privacy. I forced a laugh and told myself he was old-fashioned. But when he left, I noticed that the envelope with my latest closing statement was out of place. For a while, I convinced myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't love that was driving their actions, it was entitlement. Back at the dinner table, Isabella wasted no time. She set her briefcase on the edge of the table and said smoothly, "I understand there's a contract my client is supposed to sign." My mother's smile cracked. "This is a private family matter. There's no need for lawyers." Isabella ignored her and slid the papers from the envelope. She flipped through them quickly, her brow arching higher with each page. Then she let out a smirk. "Wow," she murmured, closing the folder with a snap. "This isn't a trust, it's a complete transfer of authority. If Abigail signed this, you'd have unilateral control over her assets, every dollar, every property, every account." The silence that followed was suffocating. My father recovered first. "It's about trust, Isabella, about protecting our family from risk." His voice was calm, but the muscle in his jaw betrayed his unease. "Interesting," Isabella replied evenly. "Because what I see is a document where Abigail loses every right to her own money. If it's really about trust, why is she the only one who surrenders anything?" My mother leaned forward, her tone sickly sweet. "You know us, Abigail, we'd never hurt you. This is just a formality." I sat back, my hands folded neatly in my lap. The contract lay on the table, a symbol of their audacity. I could feel their eyes on me, willing me to break. But I looked directly at them and said, "We're finished here tonight." For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my parents' expressions. It flickered across their faces before they masked it, but I caught it. I pushed my chair back, knowing they wouldn't let this end easily. Just as I was about to stand up, my father's voice cut through the air. "Sit down, Abigail. You're not thinking clearly." My mother's hand fluttered towards the untouched wine glass in front of me. "There's something you need to hear first," she said, her tone softer than before. "Something that changes everything." Against my better judgment, I sat back down. Isabella stood behind me, her arms crossed, a reassuring presence. My father steepled his fingers and fixed me with a measured stare. "The Hampton estate in Virginia," he began, "has been tied up in probate for years, but the process is almost over. We're about to regain full control of the property and its assets. It's worth more than you can imagine." My mother leaned in, her smile sharp but warm-looking. "And of course, you're our daughter. You stand to benefit as much as we do, but unity is essential. Probate courts value stability. Families that fall apart don't fare well in front of judges." The implication was clear. Sign the contract, prove my loyalty, and I'd be part of the inheritance. Refuse, and I'd be cast out. But beneath their honey-coated words, I saw the truth. The Hampton estate wasn't a gift, it was a trap. They wanted to tie me down, not just by blood but by legal papers. My wealth had become their bargaining chip, and the so-called inheritance was the bait. I glanced at Isabella. She didn't say a word, but her eyes told me she understood. This wasn't about legacy, it was about control. My father's glare hardened. "Without us," he said flatly, "you'll lose everything." I straightened my spine and steadied my breath. The irony almost made me laugh. They had given me nothing, yet now they threatened to take it all. Isabella placed a hand on my shoulder, a silent reminder that we weren't finished. After that dinner, I knew I couldn't just talk. My parents weren't negotiating, they were cornering me. So, the next morning, I hired a private investigator named Leo. He had a reputation for uncovering hidden truths. He worked quickly. Within a week, he placed a thick file on Isabella's desk, and we went through it together. Each page was a revelation. The Hampton estate they had dangled in front of me was mortgaged to the hilt, collateral for loans they had taken out over the past decade. The grand image of wealth they presented, with their antique furnishings and charitable events, was a mirage. Behind it all was years of reckless spending and desperate borrowing. But the worst discovery was near the end of the file. There was an application for a new credit line in my name. My signature had been forged, and it was done so carefully that it was clear someone had watched me sign documents countless times. I stared at the page until the lines blurred, rage and disbelief coursing through me. I thought about the savings account they opened for me as a child. My father had lifted me up to the teller's counter, telling me I was learning responsibility. Back then, I believed them. Now, looking at the forged document, I realized they weren't teaching me responsibility, they were teaching themselves how to access my money. Isabella's voice broke through my haze. This isn't just manipulation, Abigail. It's fraud, and it's criminal. The betrayal felt heavier than the paper in my hands. These were the people who had raised me, who claimed to know what was best for me. Now they were stealing not just from my accounts but from my very identity. I set the file down and forced my hands to unclench. If they had crossed this line, there was no telling how far they would go. I knew I had to confront not just their debts but the twisted logic that justified it all. The forged credit line haunted me for days. Late at night, I couldn't sleep, and my mind wandered back to memories I had never questioned before. When I was 11, I begged for dance lessons. My parents refused, saying I needed to learn self-discipline without such indulgences. When I asked for help with college applications, they lectured me about independence. And when I pleaded for a co-signature on my first loan, they refused, claiming it was tough love. For years, I thought of those moments as badges of resilience. But now, I saw them for what they were, rehearsals for their exploitation. They weren't teaching me independence, they were conditioning me to accept their neglect. Guilt crept in, whispering that I was being unfair. After all, they had given me a roof over my head, of food and clothes. But I voiced my concerns to Isabella, and she leaned forward, her eyes steady on mine. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal, Abigail. Betrayal already happened to you. Don't mistake survival for selfishness. Her words were like a rock, solid and unshakable. The weight of years lifted, replaced by a new determination. Isabella wasted no time. She brought in a forensic accountant named Ethan. Within days, he uncovered a hidden offshore account in my parents' names. The statements were staggering, with transfers from shell companies and loans piled on top of loans. They had been juggling liabilities for years, using the illusion of wealth to buy time. And I was the lifeline they had chosen. Isabella's office became a war room. She assembled all the evidence into a comprehensive file: fraud, attempted forgery, coercion. Each section was airtight, a nail in the coffin of their false image. But I knew facts alone wouldn't be enough. My parents thrived on stories and guilt-tripping. So, I added something they couldn't ignore. Years ago, my grandmother's brooch and my grandfather's pocket watch had disappeared from the family safe. My parents said they were being appraised, but I always had my doubts. Now, tucked into Ethan's report, I placed the pawnshop receipts Isabella had tracked down. It was proof that their theft reached back into our family's legacy. When I looked at the growing pile of documents, I felt no satisfaction, only clarity. They had built a tower of lies, and it was about to collapse. The next invitation from my parents arrived in the same fancy envelope. They thought I would come alone, but I walked into their dining room with Isabella at my side. The table was set as elegantly as ever, but I could feel the tension in the air. My father greeted me with his usual air of command. "We trust you've reconsidered," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. My mother's smile was brittle, her eyes full of false confidence. I sat down, and instead of opening the folder they had prepared for me, Isabella placed our file in the center of the table. She flipped it open calmly. Offshore accounts, forged signatures, pawned heirlooms, and debts stacked so high the estate is a hollow shell. The color drained from my mother's face. She reached across the table, her voice breaking. "Abigail, this isn't what it looks like. We only wanted to protect the family, to protect you." My father's composure cracked. His fist slammed the armrest, rattling the silverware. "This is betrayal. After all we've done, you dare to side with outsiders against us?" I met his fury with steady eyes. "Family doesn't mean ownership. You've mistaken me for your rescue fund. I won't be the solution to debts you created." My mother's pleas turned into sobs, and my father's glare cut across the room. But they didn't have time to recover. The sound of sirens filtered through the tall windows, growing louder until red and blue lights strobed against the glass. Isabella closed the file and leaned back as footsteps echoed in the hall. The knock at the door was sharp and final. I watched as the officers entered, and my parents' faces crumbled under the weight of exposure. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The weeks that followed were a blur. News of the investigation spread, and the illusion my parents had built came crashing down. The Hampton estate was pulled into foreclosure, and creditors lined up at their doors, stripping away what little remained of their false grandeur. I watched from a distance, not with glee but with a new-found clarity. Their downfall was theirs to own. Meanwhile, I tightened the security around my own life. I secured all my property deeds, account statements, and important documents in a fireproof safe. I changed locks, updated passwords, and made sure nothing was vulnerable. For the first time, my future felt truly mine, free from guilt and expectation. As I walked home that night after the wine bar, the air felt lighter, and the city streets were full of possibility. Freedom, I realized, was my truest inheritance, and I was determined to protect it with everything I had.